Your air conditioner is the most expensive solution to a problem that a billion people solved without electricity for thousands of years. What you are about to learn is the actual method, not the philosophy, not the aesthetic, but the working system that Chinese households across wildly different climates developed to stay cool through brutal summers before mechanical cooling existed. There are 10 techniques here, selected because each one does something different. Some work on your body, some on your space, some on your air, and some on the way heat moves through a building. Together they form a complete summer strategy. By the time you finish, you will know which of these you can use today, which ones require a single afternoon to set up, and what to do instead of reaching for the thermostat. The problem is not that summer is hot. The problem is that most modern homes are designed to trap heat and then cool it mechanically, which means the moment the power goes out or the bill arrives, there is no backup. In the Yangtze River Delta, summer temperatures regularly climb above 35 degrees Celsius with humidity that makes that number feel closer to 40. In the inland basin cities like Chongqing, historically called one of China's three furnaces, people lived, worked, slept, and cooked through summers that would empty a modern suburb of anyone without central air. They were not suffering through it. They were managing it with a set of techniques refined across centuries, and those techniques are grounded in physics that do not require electricity to work. The first technique is thermal mass management, using the weight of your walls and floors to absorb heat during the day and release it at night. Stone, brick, rammed earth, and tile all have high thermal mass, meaning they absorb large amounts of heat energy before their surface temperature rises. Traditional Chinese courtyard homes in northern provinces were built with thick rammed earth or brick walls, precisely because those walls could absorb the full force of afternoon sun without letting it translate into indoor heat until well after midnight, by which time night air had cooled the interior. The practical application today is to keep your blinds and windows closed during the hottest hours of the day, roughly 10 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, and open them only when outdoor air drops below indoor temperature, typically after 8 in the evening. You are using your walls as a thermal buffer. In a well-insulated home, this alone can reduce peak indoor temperature by 4 to 6 degrees. The second technique is cross-ventilation engineering, which is not the same as opening windows. In traditional southern Chinese residential architecture, buildings were oriented to capture the prevailing southeast summer wind, and interior doors, windows, and courtyard gates were positioned to create a continuous airflow path from the cooler, shaded side of the building to the warmer, sun-facing side. Hot air rises and escapes through high openings. Cooler air is drawn in through low openings on the shaded side. To replicate this, identify which side of your home faces away from the afternoon sun, typically north or east, and open windows low on that side. Open windows high on the opposite side. The temperature differential between shaded and sun-facing walls creates a pressure gradient that moves air through the space without a fan. In a two-story home, opening a low north-facing window and a high south-facing window creates a chimney effect that continues pulling air even when outdoor wind is calm. The third technique is evaporative cooling through wet materials, one of the most immediate and zero-cost methods available. When water evaporates, it absorbs heat from its surroundings. This is the physics behind sweating. In rural Fujian province, households would hang wet grass mats or dampened cloth panels in doorways and windows facing the prevailing breeze. As air passed through the wet material, evaporation cooled it by 3 to 8 degrees before it entered the room. The drier and less humid the incoming air, the more dramatic the effect. In low humidity climates, much of northern and western China, and equally applicable to arid regions of the American West or Australian interior, a single wet sheet hung in a doorway with airflow behind it can drop the room temperature noticeably within 20 minutes. Even in moderate humidity, wet cloth in a breezeway works. The mechanism is pure thermodynamics. Evaporation requires energy, and that energy comes from the heat in the passing air. The fourth technique is body cooling priority over room cooling, and it reflects a fundamental difference in how Chinese traditional medicine and practical household culture understood the heat problem. Rather than trying to cool an entire room, traditional practice focused on cooling the body's specific heat exchange points, the wrists, the back of the neck, the temples, and the inner ankles, where blood vessels run close to the skin. Cold water applied to these points cools the circulating blood directly, which the body then distributes. Fishermen along the South China Sea coast kept clay pots of water on deck, specifically for wetting these points during the heat of the afternoon. The modern application is a cloth soaked in cold water applied to the wrists and neck, not the forehead, held for 2 to 3 minutes. The temperature drop you feel is not imaginary. You are cooling the blood before it returns to your core, which reduces the work your body's thermoregulation system has to do. This allows you to tolerate significantly higher ambient temperatures without discomfort. The fifth technique is strategic shade cultivation, which operates on a longer timeline but produces permanent and compounding returns. Traditional Chinese courtyard design placed mature deciduous trees, scholar trees, paulownia, and Chinese elm were common choices on the south and west sides of structures because those orientations receive the most intense afternoon sun. Deciduous trees provide dense summer shade and then drop their leaves in winter, allowing solar gain when it is needed. The depth of a mature tree canopy can reduce the surface temperature of a wall by 15 degrees or more, which dramatically reduces how much heat that wall conducts indoors. Even a bamboo screen or a fast-growing annual vine on the west-facing wall of a modern home produces measurable cooling inside within weeks. The mechanism is simple. The wall that never heats up never radiates heat inward. In traditional Suzhou garden design, this principle was elevated to a complete architectural system, but the functional core of it is a plant placed on the right side of a building. Sixth is the use of cooling foods, not as metaphor, but as physiological strategy. Traditional Chinese dietary practice distinguishes between foods that increase metabolic heat load and foods that reduce it, a classification that modern research into thermogenesis has partly validated. Digesting protein-heavy or fat-heavy meals generates significant internal heat as a byproduct of metabolism. Digesting water-rich, lightly processed foods generates far less. In Cantonese summer cooking, meals during hot months shift heavily toward congee, cold tofu, cucumber, winter melon, and mung bean preparations. Not because of cultural preference, but because eating a heavy meal during peak afternoon heat was understood to make an already difficult situation worse. Mung beans in particular have been used in Chinese medicine for heat stroke prevention for over 1,000 years. Modern analysis confirms they are high in antioxidants and have mild anti-inflammatory effects. The practical rule: in high heat, eat light, cold, and water-rich during the afternoon hours. Save protein and fat for the evening, when your body's cooling demands are lower. The seventh technique is ground contact sleeping, which may be the most immediately actionable item on this list. Hot air rises. The floor of a room, particularly a stone, tile, or concrete floor, is consistently several degrees cooler than the air at body height, and cooler still than the air near the ceiling. In traditional Chinese southern households, bamboo sleeping mats placed directly on tile or stone floors during summer were not a sign of austerity. They were a deliberate thermal strategy. Bamboo does not retain body heat the way cotton or foam mattress materials do, which means the surface beneath a sleeping body stays cooler throughout the night. The combination of low position in the room, low thermal mass sleeping surface, and ground contact cooling can produce a sleeping environment that feels 3 to 5 degrees cooler than a mattress elevated even 2 feet off the floor. If floor sleeping is not practical, a bamboo or rattan mat placed on top of the mattress achieves a partial version of this effect by preventing the mattress from trapping body heat. The eighth technique is clay pot water cooling, which uses the same evaporative physics as the wet cloth method, but applied to water storage. Unglazed ceramic clay is slightly porous. Water stored in an unglazed clay pot slowly seeps through the walls at a microscopic level and evaporates from the outer surface, which cools the remaining water inside. This is exactly how traditional Chinese and Egyptian clay water vessels kept water drinkable in extreme heat for centuries. In rural Yunnan province, households kept unglazed clay water jars in shaded, ventilated spaces where the combination of shade, airflow, and evaporative cooling through the pot walls kept water measurably cool even on days above 38 degrees Celsius. The practical application today requires nothing more than an unglazed terracotta pot, the kind sold as a planting container, filled with water and kept in a shaded outdoor space with air movement. The water inside will be noticeably cooler than tap water within a few hours. Take stock of what these first 8 techniques share. They all work by moving heat, storing cold, or reducing heat production at the source. None of them fight heat by generating something colder. That is the underlying logic of traditional Chinese summer management. Reduce the thermal load before it accumulates rather than expend energy to remove heat after it has entered. The next two techniques operate on that same logic, but in less obvious ways. The ninth technique is nighttime thermal flushing, the systematic process of driving the accumulated heat of the day out of the building before the next day begins. This was standard practice in traditional northern Chinese courtyard homes. In the hour after sunset, when outdoor air had cooled below indoor temperature, every window, door, and courtyard gate was opened simultaneously to create maximum airflow. The goal was not comfort in that moment, it was to evacuate as much stored heat from walls, floors, and furnishings as possible before closing everything up again at dawn. A building that begins the day with its thermal mass pre-cooled can absorb far more heat before the interior becomes uncomfortable. In a modern home, the equivalent is opening every window and interior door after 9 in the evening on a clear summer night, and leaving them open until an hour before the outdoor temperature begins to climb again, typically around 6 or 7 in the morning. The additional step of using a box fan in a window to mechanically flush the air accelerates the process, but the principle works passively if airflow paths are open. The 10th technique, the one that changes how you understand everything that came before it, is breath-based body temperature regulation, specifically the practice of slow nasal breathing during heat exposure rather than open-mouth breathing. This is documented in classical Chinese medical texts going back more than 2,000 years, and modern respiratory physiology has since confirmed the mechanism. Nasal passages warm and humidify incoming air, and critically, trigger a parasympathetic nervous response that lowers heart rate and reduces the body's internal heat production. Open-mouth breathing during heat stress triggers the opposite. It activates a mild stress response that marginally increases metabolic rate and cardiovascular load, generating slightly more internal heat at exactly the moment when less is needed. The traditional practice in Chinese outdoor labor and martial training during summer months was deliberate nasal breathing kept slow and deep, with the specific awareness that the body's internal heat generation was something that could be reduced voluntarily. The practical instruction is simple. In high heat, breathe through your nose, slow the exhale, and do not breathe from the upper chest. This is not meditation, it is thermoregulation. In a room that is already at 32 degrees Celsius, the difference between your body running at full metabolic heat load and a reduced one is not trivial. It is the difference between intolerable and manageable. What these 10 techniques add up to is not a collection of tricks. They are a complete thermal management philosophy built on one insight that modern mechanical cooling has caused most people to forget. The human body is not a passive object that suffers under heat. It is a dynamic thermoregulation system that responds to behavior, food, posture, and breathing. Traditional Chinese summer practice treated the body and the building as a single integrated system. The building was designed to absorb, delay, and release heat on a 24-hour cycle. The body was managed through food, contact surfaces, and breathing to minimize its own heat production and maximize its cooling efficiency. The result was comfort, not the refrigerated, hermetically sealed comfort of modern air conditioning, but genuine physiological comfort in conditions that should have made it impossible. The one thing you can do in the next 10 minutes: close every blind and curtain on the south and west sides of your home right now if it is morning or midday. Do not open them until the outdoor temperature on that side drops below the indoor temperature. That single change, applied consistently, is where the whole system starts. The people who built these techniques did not have the option of cooling their way to comfort, so they got very precise about heat, where it comes from, how it moves, and how to stop it before it becomes a problem. That precision is available to you right now, and it costs nothing.